villain or assassin?
We have our best spies on him, but still no word on his identity. There are rumors he uses witchcraft.
He hides behind a mask and uses parlor tricks on the weak-minded.
Of course, sir. Trust me, we'll find him.
I hope so,
I'm
General.
right here!
Dishonored is a series that I've always wanted to cover, even prior to starting this project. Back in 2019, when I was outlining my first batch of 5 videos, the original Dishonored was planned as the second video actually. But you know, after some thinking, I realized that I lacked the experience to tackle a game as complex as Dishonored, so I replaced it with Disco Elysium, an obscure Estonian RPG notorious for its mechanical simplicity. That went well. Anyway, there are a few things that you should know before starting. First, this video covers the first game including the DLC. For this video I've decided to forego my usual format for a looser structure, so if you're wondering why it feels all over the place, that's the reason. Second, I'm not gonna reveal major plot points, though I will reveal some mission outcomes. Also, I'm not gonna talk about enemy AI and pathing and stuff like that. There are other videos that do a better job than I ever could, and it's not really my area of expertise. So yeah, with that being said, let's kick this shit off. Transition. You can blame Arcane Studios for a lot of stuff, but making boring and unoriginal games is not one of them. From Arx Fatalis, Dark Messiah of Might and Magic to Prey 2017, all of their games have something special, a hook that makes them stand out. Dishonored is definitely one of the weirder IPs in their portfolio. It's a stealth action immersive sim set in a city experiencing a technological renaissance of sorts, as well as a rat plague that turns people into zombies. Poverty, disease and corruption run rampant in Dunwall, and whether or not things take a turn for the better or the worse is up to the player. But before discussing what makes this game click, some story context is needed. In the original Dishonored, you assume the role of Corvo Atano, a high-ranking Imperial officer who serves as the Lord Protector of the Empress. Upon returning from a diplomatic mission to seek aid with the plague ravaging the city, the Empress is assassinated and her daughter Emily is kidnapped. Corvo of course is then framed for the whole thing, and the Royal Spymaster seizes power and declares himself Capo di tutti capi or whatever the fuck.
What did you do with young Lady Emily, traitor?
Her own bodyguard. Ironic.
I'll see you beheaded for this, Corvo. Peg him.
He's then sentenced to death, interrogated, and thrown into prison. After presumably regretting not choosing a more lucrative line of work, Corvo escapes prison with the help of the Loyalists, a ragtag group of Imperial officials who are secretly plotting to depose the Lord Regent and restore Emily to the throne. They intend to do this by systematically eliminating all the key figures of Dunwall High Society. And by they, I mean Corvo, because goddamn, this pub has some killer booze, and what better way to contribute to the resistance effort than by day drinking while the city's most wanted fugitive does all the legwork. Anyway, while Corvo gets some well-deserved rest, he is visited by steampunk Ian Curtis, otherwise known as the Outsider, an amoral being who grants Corvo supernatural powers. He then goes on and on about how Corvo is super duper special and that he can't wait to see how he'll use his newfound powers because apparently dude's bored out of his mind and there's nothing on Netflix. So yeah, while the story is nothing to write home about, it fits the setting and the gameplay mechanics, so it's serviceable. A huge part of Dishonored's appeal comes from the setting and the visuals. Dishonored is set in an industrial city where steampunk technology and supernatural forces coexist, whales are harvested for their precious oil which powers the city's industry, and Victorian street gangs make a hefty profit from selling bootleg plague elixirs.
Easy, easy. You just need a bit. Ain't you heard? Slackjaw keeps the good stuff for himself.
Rest of us get 1 part elixir, 3 parts water down.
Oh, that's just to make the swallowing go smooth.
Well, I ain't taking no chances on getting the plague. Drink till you drop, that's my motto.
You and me both, buddy. The gorgeous Victorian architecture, luxurious villas, and glitzy financial districts are brutally contrasted by the poverty and disease ravaging the commoners. Adding to the contrast are the ugly caricature character designs inspired by illustrations from 1920s pulp magazines, as well as mugshots from Edwardian London and Australia. According to Victor Antonov and Sébastien Mitton, part of the visual inspiration came from the artwork of Gustave Doré and John Atkinson Grimshaw, particularly this painting which depicts London at night. However, their trips to London and Edinburgh played a much larger role in establishing the look and design of Dishonored. They purposefully avoided busy streets and focused their attention on side streets and alleyways, trying to design the game from a, quote, rat's viewpoint, end quote. This approach is thematically and mechanically appropriate, considering Corvo spends most of his time prowling through dingy alleyways, as well as the multitude of paths and entryways he can use to infiltrate certain locations. Then there's the excellent world building. The levels are littered with notes, journals, books, and audio logs with fascinating background information about the world. This doesn't excuse the thin plot, by the way. However, the world building aspect in Dishonored is so good and fleshed out that the main narrative becomes almost secondary to everything else. For example, there's a pamphlet advising citizens to report any suspicious plague cases, practice basic hygiene, follow quarantine and social distancing protocols, and not resort to old folk remedies. Which is kinda, you know, funny, I guess, given what's going on in the real world. Some of the reading material goes into full meta territory. For instance, there's a letter in which an exasperated Admiral Havelock tells Piero to stop requesting funds for what he perceives as useless tools and supplies. So basically, because the Admiral is a fucking cheapskate, you're forced to scavenge for supplies in-game. On a side note, why the Admiral would bother writing a letter to Piero when they're one building apart is beyond me. I like to think that the Admiral, in a bout of frustration, pulled rank on Piero and wrote this semi-official letter to settle things once and for all. Or he's trying to avoid Piero, which is understandable for reasons I'll reveal later in the video.
You lost your mind?
What happened? Did you do that?
Anyway, there are tons of other pieces of literature that are just as compelling. However, some of these books are way too long and filled with redundant information that I would have preferred if it were delivered through dialogue. Like, instead of reading this Robert Caro long biography detailing Slackjaw's life, what if I learned this stuff from, I don't know, Slackjaw? Then there's the fact that some levels suffer from an overabundance of reading material. This is just from the first hour. Look at it, it's ridiculous. But even so, this wasn't a deal breaker. It's just that by the end of the game I was going through a hell of an information fatigue, and I wish the designers found other ways to deliver these tidbits of background information. From a mechanical perspective, Dishonored plays and feels like the immersive sims of the old. Think Deus Ex or System Shock, but with steam engines and creepy old witches. Much like Deus Ex, the game world is split into a series of self-contained mission-focused areas, which are designed to support multiple avenues of exploration. A core element of the design is Blink, a short to medium distance teleportation ability that allows Corvo to quickly traverse levels. The existence of Blink has a twofold effect on the gameplay. First, it makes exploring every nook and cranny an enjoyable and empowering process. Secondly, and arguably even more importantly, it makes Dishonored much more accessible to players who don't like stealth games. You can basically blink your way through levels, do whatever you have to do, and make your escape without ever having to analyze a single enemy patrol route. Together with Blink, Corvo has a multitude of tools and abilities at his disposal, both lethal and non-lethal. In terms of tools, you have a sword, a crossbow that shoots normal and sleeping darts, a pistol, grenades, and a heart. The heart is particularly intriguing. Equipping it reveals the location of runes and bone charms. Runes are used to purchase and upgrade your supernatural powers, while bone charms offer various buffs and bonuses, kind of like perks in other games. The heart also reveals secrets, which you may or may not want to know.
He has spied upon Callista as she bathes. More than once.
Ugh. Corvo has a relatively diverse set of supernatural abilities, both lethal and non-lethal. I did a sneaky kill as few people as possible playthrough for this video, so I don't have much experience when it comes to Corvo's more offensive abilities. But just for the sake of presentation, you have Wind Blast, which slams people into walls and solid objects with lethal force when upgraded, Devouring Swarm, which summons rats that attack enemies and devour corpses, and Shadow Kill, which turns all foes into ashes when killed. The non-lethal abilities are, in my opinion, more mechanically interesting for one simple reason. They complement the open-ended non-linear level design more than the offensive ones. Abilities such as Bend Time and Possession can help you manipulate the environment in a variety of ways. Like, you can freeze time and breeze through a heavily guarded area, take control of a rat or a fish and bypass an entire section, and so on. On that same note, Dark Void is ridiculously OP when fully upgraded because it not only allows you to see all creatures whether dead or alive through walls and their side cones, but it also reveals resources and machineries. Combine this with something like Boot Stealth 2, which eliminates Corvo's footsteps when sprinting, and you can become an unstoppable stealth machine. Dishonored also has a type of morality system in the form of the Chaos system, which is also the name of my latest nu metal band, album out May 69, 2021. This system basically records the amount of violence you cause, which modifies the game and the story in certain ways. High Chaos increases the number of rats and plague victims, makes enemies more aggressive and numerous, and adds new dialogue and scenes. Low Chaos, well, you know, it's pretty self-explanatory, and you get a good ending. The problem is that while on paper this system doesn't force you to play the game in a certain way, in reality that's not really the case. For one, when I said that the non-lethal abilities are more mechanically interesting, I meant that in the truest sense of the word. They're kinda I don't wanna say dull, but not as exciting as the lethal abilities. Like, don't get me wrong, if you want to play Dishonored as a straight up action game where you kill everybody, you can do that, but the game will punish you for this. However, if you want to see as much of what the game offers as possible, do every side quest, open every safe, get every rune, you will have to go out of your way to do this. This involves exploring every corner of the map, talking to every NPC, and resorting to violence only when necessary, which by extension effectively bars you from half the game's abilities and gadgets, because why the fuck invest your precious and rare runes in an offensive ability that you're actively punished for using? Now, with that being said, I don't think this design philosophy is as bad as people make it to be. For one, it's very thematically appropriate. Corvo is a wanted fugitive who was framed for a murder he didn't commit and is presented as a ruthless killer by state propaganda. Which begs the question, should he play into the hands of the people who betrayed him, or be the bigger man and prove them wrong? As sweet as revenge may be, taking things slowly and not resorting to violence pays off more in the long run. Standing on top of a lamppost and listening to conversations might reveal a clue or an alternate way of infiltrating a location. On that same note, saving some civilian from a group of guards may result in a safe combination. Oh, and speaking of safe combinations, there's a cool mini puzzle where you have to piece together a safe code by inspecting some rich guy's paintings, which was pretty cool to be honest. Which brings us to the non-linear mission design. This is arguably one of Dishonored's strongest feats and the reason why it's regarded as a cult classic. Dishonored has some of the most expansive and open levels I've ever seen, with wide boulevards, towering rooftops and intricate networks of sleazy alleyways and cramped side streets that are just a joy to explore. At the start of each mission, players are dropped into a large level and left to approach objectives in whichever way they want, with little to no guidance. Broadly speaking, missions can be broken down into 4 phases. The exploration phase, where players are gathering intel about targets and infiltration options, the infiltration phase itself, the target elimination phase, and finally the exfiltration phase, where players have to make their escape. A great example that illustrates the genius behind Dishonored's approach to level design is Lady Boyle's Last Party, a mission where Corvo must infiltrate a masquerade ball at Lady Boyle's mansion. Fuck, that's hard to say. Up until now, you've only heard rumors about the petty nobles who squabble over trivial shit, gossip, gorge on the best food, and enjoy a life of luxury while the less privileged are dying by the thousands and dumped into communal graves. But now, you get to witness it firsthand. Oh, and by the way, the mansion itself is right next door to a Weeper ghetto. You could say it made my blood boil. Am I right, guys? Am I right? No? Okay. Anyway, there's more than one way to infiltrate the mansion. You can either obtain an invitation by breaking into an art dealer's apartment in the previous mission, or by snatching one in the front yard, enter through the second floor balcony doors, and so on and so forth. Once inside, you have to identify Lady Boyle herself. There are 3 Lady Boyles in attendance, each wearing the same costume but in different colors, with the target itself being randomized every time the level is played. The easiest way to identify the real Lady Boyle is by talking to this nice lady here. Bring her a drink and she'll spill the beans, like literally before even taking a single sip of her drink. Or you could, you know, the Mask of the Red Death all of these rich assholes one by one and reach your target via process of elimination. Pun totally intended. But you know me, this isn't really my style, so I decided to hit them where it hurts most.
Go ahead, take it. Everyone does. I had a servant sew me an extra pocket.
Indeed.
Anyway, you get the idea. It's also possible to neutralize all of Corvo's targets in a non-lethal manner. In one of the first missions, you are sent to eliminate the High Overseer, the leader of Dunwall's highest religious order. Reaching the High Overseer's chambers and killing him is quite easy. But there's another way. Why kill him when you can brand the fucker as a heretic and cause a PR nightmare for the same institution responsible for thousands of extrajudicial killings on fake grounds? Another mission has you eliminate the Pendleton twins. They are the sadistic owners of a network of mines where plague victims are sentenced to hard labor. However, as their brother, who's also a member of the conspiracy, puts it,
these days they're best known for exploiting their favor with him to cheat others out of their wealth. Let's just say that not every family evicted and quarantined for having the plague actually has the plague.
As you might expect, killing them is quite easy. However, if you do a quest for Slackjaw, the boss of the Bottle Street gang, his men kidnap the Pendletons, cut off their tongues and drop them in the same mines where they send thousands of innocents to perish. Harsh, but fitting. While you could argue that most of the non-lethal options are deserved and fitting, there's one in particular that I can't stomach. It basically involves knocking Lady Boyle unconscious and delivering her body to her stalker. What the fuck, Arcane? This is not an ironic fate, it's just cruel and, to be frank, fucking gross. Before moving on to the DLCs, I want to talk a bit about the characters. They're boring. Well, most of them. The conspirators in particular are some of the most bland characters I've ever seen in a video game. You can basically describe them in one sentence. Welcome ladies and gentlemen to a new edition of Write Your Character! Today's contestants are the Craven, Skeezy Noble, the Gruff Military Man, the Bootlicking Servant, the Quirky Inventor, and the Nice Lady, I guess? Samuel, the boatman and Corvo's source of transportation between missions, is infuriatingly annoying. If I hear one more folksy anecdote about society followed by "But what the hell do I know, I'm just small fish," I swear to God I'm gonna pick up coding just to mod this game into allowing me to shove that pedal down his fucking throat. Piero is also very problematic. He's a fucking creep. You can catch him spying on Callista while she's bathing. And how does the game address this abhorrent behavior, you ask? You know, Piero, he's weird, but he's harmless. Nah, dude, he's not harmless. Dude's a renowned scientist who creates killing tools.
Can't you see I'm about to bathe? Corvo, under other circumstances, I assure you I might welcome your advances. I might welcome your advances. I might welcome your advances. I might welcome your advances.
The villains are just as boring. They're pretty one-dimensional, their only character traits are their greed and lust for power. Look, There's nothing wrong with one-dimensional characters as long as they're entertaining and the voice actors put in a decent enough performance, but that's not the case here. They all sound so bored, and it's not like Arcane hired amateur actors. The cast includes talented entertainers such as John Slattery of Mad Men fame, Chloe Grace Moretz, and Lena fucking Headey, just to name a few. The only interesting character is Dowd, a master assassin and the Empress's murderer, but we'll talk more about him once we get to the DLCs. This would have been the perfect moment to wrap up and move on, but I don't want to end this section on such a negative note. Dishonored is a very layered game that warrants multiple playthroughs. This was my 4th time playing it and I was still discovering new stuff. It's a gem and I wish it wasn't so underrated. But here's the kicker, the DLCs surpass the main game in every possible way. It's just a bunch of challenge maps, nothing to see here, let's move on. The Knife of Dunwall is the first of 2 story-driven DLCs. You play as Dowd, the leader of a group of assassins known as the Whalers, and Empress Jessamine Caldwell's killer in Dishonored. The story of this first piece of DLC runs in parallel with the events of the main game. While smaller in scope, it's much more tight and focused, with the story revolving around Dowd's personal quest for redemption. Dowd is voiced by none other than Michael Madsen. Yes, that Michael Madsen. Madsen is known for playing charming, terrifying baddies, and he absolutely kills it in this role. Again, pun totally intended.
Word came from my second-in-command, Billy Lurk. In a house built on secrets. Lurk was especially good at uncovering them. There was a ship called the Delilah that hunted whales for Bundry Rothwild. A former deckhand who'd made good.
Michael Madsen does an excellent job conveying Dowd's complex psyche. A dry, sardonic professional killer who is racked with guilt over his last job. This is a guy who's killed lawyers, bankers, nobles, politicians, police officers on the take, but now he knows he might have crossed a line. By murdering a beloved empress and abducting her daughter, he threw the empire into chaos and helped a group of morally bankrupt nobles seize power. Ironically, these are the same kinds of people he's made a career out of eliminating for coin. Dowd's disillusionment with his profession is further explored and fleshed out during cutscenes. His insights into Dunwall's high society and gangland are fascinating, and some of the best pieces of world building this series has to offer. While the main game is, for the most part, a tour that takes you through Dunwall's high society, now you get to experience the city's seedy underbelly from the perspective of a man who's a master of his environment. It's all the more fitting then that the first mission is set in Slaughterhouse Row, an industrial complex where whales are processed for their precious oil, meat and bones. While the main game drip feeds players small pieces of information regarding Dunwall's whaling industry, now you get to see how the proverbial sausage is made. And it's not pretty. The abhorrent, exploitative working conditions of the lowly employees and the sheer brutality of the process itself are just shocking. It's been 2 weeks since I played this level and I'm still thinking about it. One of the slaughterhouses has a live whale attached to a life-sustaining device to maximize its oil output. Fuck, man. I just couldn't let the poor thing live and I put it out of its misery. Now, in terms of gameplay, the Knife of Dunwall takes all the good things from Dishonored and improves upon them. Levels are more expansive and layered than ever. A Captain of Industry alone can take up to 2 hours to complete if you want to do all the side stuff. Exploration is even more enjoyable this time around thanks to Dowd's special version of Blink. It's effectively a mix of Time Bend and Blink. Using Dowd's variant while staying still freezes time. So for example, you can jump, freeze time, scout the area, and then blink to your preferred location. The Hound Pit's pub, which was the hub area in Dishonored, is replaced with a shop screen where you can buy supplies and upgrades between missions. The Knife of Dunwall introduces a brand new gameplay mechanic called Favors. These are items which Dowd can purchase before missions and they alter situations in specific areas. Just to give you a small example, purchasing the safe code before Captain of Industry will provide Dowd with a 3-digit safe combination written on one of the walls by a guard. I love this gameplay mechanic, it's very thematic. The Knife of Dunwall solves the main game's low variety of non-lethal gadgets by introducing 2 new ones, a stun mine and a choke dust. The DLC also adds some quality of life improvements. For instance, you can now increase your sleep dart capacity, thank God for that. Sadly, not all changes are for the better. The heart from the main game is combined with Daud's version of dark vision. This is fine, until you realize that Daud's version of the ability has a significantly shorter range than Corvo's, and finding runes and bone charms is harder than it should. Look, I know this change makes sense from a story perspective, but it doesn't make it less annoying. Non-lethal options to neutralize targets are back, but this time they're more ironic than ever. The second mission takes place in Dunwall's glitzy financial district, the home of Barrister Timsh. He's a cartoonishly corrupt aristocrat, who uses his legal powers to evict families from their homes and claim their property. Timsh himself can be sniped from a safe distance at the beginning of the mission, but talking with Roland, a noble whose property was wrongfully seized by Timsh, unlocks the non-lethal approach. Basically, you can give Timsh a taste of his own medicine by switching a letter of immunity he carries on his person with a fake seizure document, followed by placing another sack in the ventilation system of his estate. Timsh will be arrested by a general and his property will be seized. The chaos system also returns in full force, refined and improved. I can't really talk about it without spoiling the story, but what I can say is that it carries over between DLCs and it affects the story and the world in ways that make more sense this time around. All in all, the Knife of Dunwall is a great piece of DLC that refines the original's mechanics and provides an engaging story. With that being said, let's move on to the final piece of DLC, the Brigmore Witches. The Brigmore Witches begins with Daud having a dream of fighting Corvo. Whether Daud wins the fight or not, Daud wakes up in his home base in the flooded district, a location which you visited as Corvo in the main game and again as Daud in the Knife of Dunwall. A cool little detail here is that if you beat the first DLC on low chaos and spared your targets, the assassins start talking shit about Daud behind his back. Daud feels more conflicted about his life than ever, which is again excellently conveyed in the cutscenes. Honestly, the Brigmore Witches might be Michael Madsen's best voice work to date. While the Knife of Dunwall did an excellent job of humanizing him, the Brigmore Witches finally reveals Daud for the sad, tired and conflicted old man he really is. Daud knows that Corvo is out there and that it's only a matter of time until he'll have to face the consequences of his actions. But the less I reveal about this, the better. So let's move on to the gameplay. In terms of gameplay, the Brigmore Witches is similar to the Knife of Dunwall with a few small additions. Bone Charms receive a new coat of paint in the form of corrupted Bone Charms, which are exactly what you might imagine. They're like regular Bone Charms, only with caveats. Oh, and there's also Pull, a spell that allows Daud to lift and manipulate objects. And that's it. Now, I'm not being lazy, that's really it. One thing that I forgot to mention about the DLC are all the cool links and callbacks to the main game. Remember Griff, the black marketer from Dishonored? Actually, you can't, because this is the first time I'm mentioning him. Whoops. Well, if you search the apartment of the black marketer from the Brigmore Witches, you can find a letter addressed to Griff.
There's a man whose debt to me is well past due.
I'm not a bill collector.
I don't want the money. I want his head. I pay you well. And you can use the money to buy things from me.
It might be hard to imagine, but the level design is even better in the Brigmore Witches. This DLC once again recycles a map from the main game, but it's one of those few cases where it's done right. So you may remember that the second level of Dishonored has you escape Coldridge Prison. Well, now you get to infiltrate it with Daud and witness the effects of Corvo's escape. The guards near the bridge that you jumped off of, yes, those guards, are falsely accused of aiding Corvo and executed. Guards are paranoid and talk about Corvo's alleged magical abilities. The prison's security level has been upgraded to ADX Florence levels. Yeah, looks like Corvo made a hell of an impression. So what do you do here? Well, there's always the option of putting their security measures to the test by massacring all the guards. Or, even better, you can use the favors mechanic dressed as an overseer and walk right to your first objective. Or a mix of both. I'm usually not a big fan of that whole, reusing an older map but with a twist kind of shtick, but this time around I really enjoyed it. As Corvo, you didn't have any supernatural powers and you were restricted to a few linear corridors. but as Dowd you discover how big this prison actually is. The third mission, The Dead Hills, takes place in arguably the largest level the series has seen up until that point. It's split into 3 huge locations. Draper's Ward, Dunwall's equivalent to Fifth Avenue and home to high-end retail shops before the outbreak of the plague. It's Riverfront, which is the headquarters of the Dead Hills gang, and the Textile Mill, home to the Hatters, a vicious gang of top hat-wearing gangsters who are at war with the Dead Hills gang and the Bottle Street gang from Dishonored. Now, this mission has a ridiculous amount of tasks and side objectives, and just as many options to tackle them. Just to give you an idea, this mission will have you recreate a wedding with 2 corpses, assassinate a gang member, fulfill the last request of an old mob boss, and that's just scratching the surface. Unfortunately, the last mission is probably the weakest point of the DLC, which is really sad because visually speaking, it's the prettiest of the series so far.
Everything is in order, sir.
The Brigmore Manor was once occupied by one of the richest families from Dunwall, but has since fallen in disrepair after the family lost its wealth and influence during the whale oil boom and had to relocate to a more affordable neighborhood. Probably Brooklyn. As a result, while the exterior has kept some of its charm and opulence, the interior is, well, let's say train-spotting bathroom material. It has that sort of decrepit beauty like Draper's Ward and that other game with swords and zombies. I wanna say, Dark Spirits? The Souls of the Dark? It's on the tip of my tongue. From a design perspective, the mission is a fucking slog that involves a lot of backtracking and light puzzle solving, and you know how much I hate puzzles. Then there's the Brigmore Witches themselves. I have several problems with them. First, the game makes no attempt to humanize them, or at least try to make you understand their motives, at least in my opinion. Dowd's assassins are orphans, beggars, or kids from broken homes, and while that doesn't justify their actions, you kind of understand why they'd choose to pursue this line of work. Like Billy, Dowd's lieutenant in the Knife of Dunwall. So you can't help but feel retroactively shitty for killing them in Dishonored. At least a little bit. The witches are wicked? I don't know. So I saw no reason not to kill them. Second, the witches possess powers similar to yours, and the game is definitely not designed for this type of combat. Dishonored has what people who know more about this stuff than me call asymmetrical combat. Basically, it means that the player has a clear advantage over the enemies, and the enemies compensate in certain ways. Well, there's nothing asymmetrical about fighting witches who can blink and shit. So if you're gonna use time bend and cheat your way through these fights, nobody will blame you. Well, that wraps up Dishonored and the DLCs. The main game is a marvel of level design and immersive sim gameplay, and the DLCs surpass it in every single way, especially in terms of gameplay and story. This video took longer than I initially expected, so thank you so much for your patience. If you've enjoyed this video and want to see me making more of these, I guess you can call them long-form video essay types of videos, please let me know in the comments. Anyway, that's it for today. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.